You ever have a day that starts with someone telling you, in not so many words, you don't belong here, but by the time the sun goes down, the entire foundation they're standing on is about to crumble? That was my Tuesday a day when a designer suit was less about fashion and more about armor. When a single look in an airport lounge set off a reckoning that would change a company forever. Yeah, that happened. And it all started with a flight I'd taken 1,000 times before, just never quite like this. I'm Vivian Winters. For most of my life, I played by the rules, the ones written, and more often, the ones whispered behind closed doors. I built my way up from a tiny house on Detroit's east side, with a father who pressed his airport maintenance uniform like he was going to Sunday service, and a mother who treated education as a religion. I learned early that aviation never slept, and neither did the people trying to prove they belonged in the sky. My childhood smelled like black coffee, sounded like the shuffle of my dad's boots leaving for work at 4:30 a.m., and looked like the sagging bookshelf in our living room encyclopedias, business magazines, aviation journals. Fill this up. My mother would tap my forehead, and no one can empty it. By the time I was a teenager, I could rattle off the aircraft fleets of every major airline, map out business models, and chart my future like an air traffic controller tracing flight paths through a thunderstorm. The first time I said I wanted Harvard Business School, my high school counselor just smiled and slid a pile of community college brochures my way, saying those Ivy Leagues weren't really for girls like me. I took the brochures, thanked her, then stayed up for 3 nights perfecting my application. 6 months later, I delivered my Harvard acceptance letter plus a photo of that same counselor holding it, face frozen in disbelief, right back to her office. Harvard was just as tough and twice as biased as my parents warned. Study groups that pretended I wasn't there, professors who blinked twice when I aced their tests, classmates who only heard my ideas when they came out of someone else's mouth, usually a white guy's. There was this one time during a finance class, some guy asked for my perspective as a black woman in a discussion about leverage buyouts. My perspective is as someone who actually did the reading, I said. Earned myself one nervous laugh and a lifetime friend. Graduation put me top 3% of my class, job offers from everywhere, and a decision that raised more than a few eyebrows. I chose Skyline Aviation, a mid-sized airline that paid less than any Fortune 500, but had room to grow if you were patient, strategic, and maybe a little stubborn. My advisor said I'd be stuck in middle management, the last boys club in American business. He was half right. 5 years, $43 million in cost savings, and I was still getting passed up for promotion watching less qualified men ride escalators I built. But instead of getting bitter, I got organized, documented everything, made myself indispensable, and waited for my moment. That moment came during the 2018 fuel crisis. Me hedging strategy saved Skyline from the bankruptcy that took out 2 competitors. Suddenly, no one could ignore me. 3 promotions in as many years, then chief operating officer, and finally, last year when the old CEO retired, the board brought in a headhunting firm, 11 white men, 1 white woman, and me. After my presentation, the board was silent for half a minute, then applauded. 6 months ago, I became the first black woman to lead a major airline. Cue the whispers. Is she just a PR move? Can she handle it? How's she going to deal with the old guard? The industry's good OL boys started closing ranks. Rival CEOs suddenly too busy to attend my welcome reception. It was nothing new, just more public than before. I kept my head down, worked 14-hour days, and racked up record profits for 2 straight quarters. Then came a merger talks with Pacific West Airlines, a move that would define my legacy. The board's chairman made his skepticism clear. Those guys play hardball. Maybe Reynolds should go with you. Reynolds, a board member with half my qualifications and twice my confidence. I told him I'd prepared 3 strategies for the negotiation, but was open to collaboration. Backpedaled quick. I'd learned to let my competence do the talking. The night before my flight to San Francisco, I packed like a general going to battle. Armani suit for negotiations, Chanel for the welcome dinner, Prada for the tours, every piece chosen to project power, competence, and the unspoken truth. Black women in the C-suite don't get to make mistakes. My wardrobe was my armor, my strategy airtight, my mind already running through contingencies. Morning at Atlanta International was a familiar storm of business travelers, all caffeine and hurry. I made my way to the priority check-in, looking the part in tailored charcoal, gold accessories, and a confident updo. But you know that look people give you when you don't fit their picture? I caught it more times than I could count that morning. The attendant at the counter checked my boarding pass like she was trying to catch a forgery, then handed it over with a tight smile. In the lounge, it happened again an attendant asked if I belonged in first class. I just showed her my pass, and she backtracked, but not before the two execs beside me muttered about diversity hires and bold moves. I kept my face neutral and my jaw tight. At the gate, the real fireworks started. The flight attendant blonde Bob, name tag reading Karen Walsh, stopped me at the priority lane. "This line is for first class and elite," she said, looking past me. "I'm aware," I replied, extending my pass. Her suspicion was as clear as day. "How did you get this boarding pass?" she pressed. Suddenly, everyone's eyes were on us. I said, "I bought it, same as everyone here." She called over another attendant, James Chun, who looked at my pass, looked at me, then straightened like he'd been shocked. "MS. Winters, welcome aboard. We're honored to have you," he said, almost trembling. Karen turned pale as he explained I was the CEO of the company. She stammered, "You don't look like what?" I asked. "The CEO?" The answer hung between us. I boarded in silence, the whispers starting before I even sat down. This wasn't my first run-in with bias, but something snapped that morning. Maybe because I was tired, maybe because this was so public, or maybe because I'd finally earned the power to do something about it. I texted my HR director, Devin Carter, documenting everything, then asked James to serve first class instead of Karen. He did, and she kept her distance. Halfway through the flight, Karen appeared, face carefully blank. "I want to apologize for the misunderstanding," she said. I sipped my coffee. Was I not following procedures when I show my boarding pass? She fumbled. "Sometimes passengers get confused." "I wasn't confused," I said. "You were. Would you have questioned a white man in a business suit?" She couldn't answer. Intent doesn't erase impact, MS. "Walsh, this isn't about my feelings. It's about a pattern." After landing, I called the captain and regional manager to the galley and laid it all out. This wasn't a mistake. It's a pattern. Karen pleaded for her job, but I reminded her actions have consequences. I requested her immediate removal from the return flight and a full investigation. On the drive to my hotel, Devin Carter called. 7 prior complaints, all from passengers of color, all dismissed by the same management chain one that reported to board member Reynolds. Statistical analysis showed white passengers' complaints got resolved 83% of the time. For black and brown passengers, it dropped to 37%. This wasn't a Karen problem, it was a skyline problem, one actively protected by the old guard. By afternoon, I was launching a company-wide investigation digging into every division, every complaint. Emails surfaced, proving Reynolds had personally buried a previous discrimination probe, reassigned investigators, and protected his allies. Employees started coming forward. Some, like James Chun, were ready to testify if we protected them. Others, like the regional manager, were more cautious until they realized the tide was turning. As the day wore on, Reynolds made his move emergency board meeting, accusations that I was overreacting, painting me as emotional, unstable, driven by a personal vendetta. I countered with evidence, employee testimony, data, internal emails. When Captain Pearson testified about being pressured by senior leadership to reconsider his statement, the boardroom went silent. The old tactics delay, deflect, dismiss aren't working anymore. I demanded protection for all employees willing to testify. The board chair backed me. Reynolds' allies wavered, realizing that legal liability and public scandal were more dangerous than a CEO who refused to let things slide. The next day, I issued a company-wide statement to open investigation, guarantees of non-retaliation, a personal promise that every employee and passenger would be treated with respect and dignity. Reports poured in. What started with a single confrontation at a boarding gate had become a reckoning for a company and a culture and had protected bias in the name of business as usual. Karen Walsh, realizing her position was crumbling, reached out with her own story how she'd been shaped by Skyline's culture as much as she'd contributed to it. Maybe she'd become another unlikely ally in rooting out the rot. By nightfall, Reynolds was cornered, exposed for using his influence to suppress complaints, maintain an exclusionary culture, and even sabotage merger talks out of spite. The board suspended his access, authorized a full investigation, and backed my commitment to change. The real fight was just beginning a resistance from the old guard, the legal battles sure to follow, the slow, hard work of shifting culture. But something fundamental had shifted. Skyline Aviation was never going to be the same. The question now wasn't whether I belonged in first class, it was whether the company had the courage to become what it always claimed to be. You ever witness something like this? Ever see a single act of bias blow up into a battle for a company's soul? Would you risk your career, your reputation, to fix something so broken? Comment below though you think justice was served, or was this just the beginning of another fight? And if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let's talk about it.